The dollar's death clock, why the final stage of collapse guarantees. Hyperinflation. By 2025, the world's financial system is standing at the edge of a historic transformation. The United States dollar, once seen as unshakable, stable, and supreme, now ticks toward what many experts call its death clock. For nearly a century, the dollar has been the backbone of global trade, energy pricing, and reserve holdings. But beneath the surface, deep cracks are spreading through the foundation of this monetary empire. Since the end of World War II, the US dollar became the world's reserve currency under the Bretton Woods system. Gold once backed its value, ensuring trust and global dominance. However, when President Nixon ended the gold standard in 1971, the dollar became purely fiat, backed only by the full faith and credit of the US government. That moment marked the beginning of a slow but inevitable decay. For decades, America financed its prosperity through debt. It printed trillions of dollars, sold government bonds, and convinced other nations to hold its currency. This system worked as long as confidence remained intact. But confidence is fragile, and once lost, it cannot be easily restored. In recent years, that confidence has been shattered by uncontrolled money printing. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Federal Reserve created over $8 trillion in new currency, nearly one-fourth of all US dollars ever created in history. That single act poured rocket fuel on inflation and pushed the economy closer to financial meltdown. Today, inflation eats away at the dollar's real value every month. Groceries, fuel, housing, and healthcare costs are rising faster than wages. And while official inflation numbers claim 3% or 4%, the real-world experience of ordinary Americans tells another story. The dollar's purchasing power is collapsing quietly, but unmistakably. The U.S. national debt has now surpassed $35 trillion. Every minute, that number grows by millions of dollars. The interest payments alone, not the debt itself, just the interest, are approaching $1 trillion per year. That is more than America spends on its military, education, or infrastructure. The government has only two choices: raise taxes massively or print more money. Both lead to economic disaster. Raising taxes slows growth, destroys jobs, and fuels public anger. Printing money, on the other hand, guarantees hyperinflation. The world has seen this before, from Weimar Germany in the 1920s to Zimbabwe in the 2000s. Nations that printed their way out of debt always ended the same way, with their currencies becoming worthless. And now, the US is following that same path, only on a far larger scale. Meanwhile, global powers are preparing for life after the dollar. China, Russia, India, and several Middle Eastern nations are quietly building alternatives to the US-dominated financial system. They are trading oil and commodities in their own currencies. The so-called de-dollarization movement is accelerating, and it's no longer just talk. In 2024, the BRICS nations launched initiatives to settle international trade using gold-backed or digital currencies. This signals the beginning of the end for the dollar's global monopoly. For the first time in modern history, countries can bypass the dollar entirely. Even US allies are beginning to hedge their bets. Saudi Arabia, once the cornerstone of the petrodollar system, has begun accepting other currencies for oil sales. This change shatters the foundation of the dollar's dominance. Without global demand for dollars, the Federal Reserve cannot print freely without consequences. The dollar's strength has always depended on trust. Trust in America's economy, its institutions, and its ability to repay debts. But today, that trust is fading fast. Political instability, trillion-dollar deficits, and reckless spending have eroded faith in Washington's leadership. Foreign investors are quietly selling US bonds and reducing dollar reserves. When confidence breaks, the collapse will not be slow. It will be sudden, violent, and irreversible. Financial markets will panic, bond yields will skyrocket, and the Federal Reserve will face an impossible choice: raise rates to defend the dollar or print even more to save the economy. Either choice ends in disaster. If the Fed raises rates too high, the US government won't be able to pay interest on its own debt. If it prints more money to cover the gap, the currency will devalue overnight. This is the final stage, the hyperinflation trap. At this stage, the government loses control over the value of its currency. Prices rise faster than wages, savings evaporate, and ordinary people struggle to survive. The middle class, the backbone of every stable society, is wiped out. Those who hold assets in dollars see their wealth destroyed almost instantly. Many financial analysts now warn that this final stage is not a distant theory. It's already unfolding, and 2025 may mark the tipping point. The dollar death clock is not a conspiracy, it's a timeline built on undeniable math. Debt, inflation, and political denial are converging into one unavoidable explosion. As the Federal Reserve continues its quantitative easing policies, printing dollars to fund endless deficits, global markets are losing patience. When that patience runs out, confidence will collapse, and the dollar will follow. In that moment, Americans will wake up to the true cost of decades of fiscal addiction. Hyperinflation begins slowly, then all at once. First, prices rise by 5%, then 10%, then 50%. Eventually, people stop trusting money entirely. They rush to buy gold, silver, food, or anything that holds real value. Already, the signs are visible. Major retailers are raising prices weekly instead of monthly. Property prices are becoming unaffordable for the average citizen. And financial experts whisper about a coming currency reset. The US dollar's decline isn't just a domestic issue, it's a global one, because every nation tied to the dollar will feel the shockwaves. When the dollar falls, global trade will freeze, and panic will ripple through stock and bond markets worldwide. It will be the largest transfer of wealth in modern history. This is not mere speculation, it's the mathematical consequence of decades of unsustainable policies. No empire in history has survived once its currency was debased beyond recovery, and history does not repeat, it rhymes. The dollar's death clock is ticking louder each day. The dollar's death clock, why the final stage of collapse guarantees. Hyperinflation by 2025, Part 2. When a currency begins to die, the signs are subtle at first. People still use it, businesses still trade with it, and governments still pretend everything is under control. But beneath the surface, the system is already breaking apart. This is exactly what is happening to the US dollar right now. The early stage of hyperinflation always begins with denial. Officials promise that inflation is temporary or manageable. Central banks insist they have the tools to control prices. But those tools, interest rate hikes, bond buybacks, or reserve adjustments, stop working when the real problem is structural. The US government has spent decades building a financial system that depends entirely on cheap credit and endless borrowing. For years, the Federal Reserve kept interest rates near zero, allowing Wall Street to borrow money almost for free. This created the illusion of prosperity, booming stock markets, rising home values, and consumer confidence. But that prosperity was fake, built entirely on printed money. Now that inflation is rising, the Fed is trapped. If it raises interest rates too high, the economy collapses. If it lowers them again, inflation explodes. There is no safe option left. The moment inflation becomes self-feeding, it enters what economists call the acceleration phase. In this phase, people lose faith in the currency's future value. They begin spending faster, buying goods now because they know prices will rise tomorrow. This behavior, in turn, pushes prices even higher, a vicious spiral with no escape. Already, this behavior is visible in America. Consumers rush to buy cars, electronics, and homes before prices rise further. Corporations stockpile materials because they fear supply chain disruptions. This panic buying feeds inflation like gasoline poured on fire. Meanwhile, wages are not keeping up. Workers demand higher pay, but companies cannot raise salaries as fast as costs rise. This causes strikes, shortages, and growing resentment across the workforce. Eventually, governments are forced to step in, usually by printing even more money to help. That's the next domino. Stimulus checks, social welfare expansion, and massive subsidies all seem generous on paper, but in reality, they accelerate the destruction of purchasing power. Each new dollar printed steals value from every dollar already in existence. The US dollar, once seen as good as gold, is now being treated like a disposable tool for political survival. Every election year, politicians promise new spending programs, free healthcare, debt forgiveness, green energy, or military aid abroad. But they never explain where the money will come from. The truth is, it comes from you, the taxpayer, through inflation. When governments print money, they don't create wealth. They simply redistribute it from savers to debtors, from the poor to the elite. Those closest to the money printer banks, corporations, and politicians benefit first. By the time that new money reaches ordinary citizens, prices have already risen. This phenomenon is known as the Cantillon effect. It means that inflation is not just an economic problem, it's a political weapon. It transfers wealth upward and leaves the working class poorer each year. And now, as America's debt explodes, this weapon is being used at full power. In 2025, analysts predict that debt servicing will consume nearly 40% of all federal revenue. That means nearly half of every tax dollar collected will go just to pay interest. No government can survive long under that pressure. The only way out, as always, is to print even more money. This cycle is deadly because it feeds on itself. The more dollars the government prints, the weaker each dollar becomes. The weaker the dollar becomes, the more the government must print to maintain operations. Eventually, the currency loses all credibility and people flee to alternatives. Right now, that alternative is gold, silver, Bitcoin, and foreign assets. Smart investors are already moving their wealth out of dollar-based accounts. They know what history teaches. When a currency collapses, those who hold hard assets survive and those who don't are ruined. Hyperinflation isn't just about prices, it's about confidence. Once the world stops believing in the US dollar, it will lose its reserve status almost overnight. When that happens, trillions of dollars held abroad will come rushing home. Foreign governments, corporations, and investors will dump dollars in exchange for real assets. That flood of returning dollars will ignite a final inflation explosion. Imagine every dollar outside the US suddenly trying to buy American goods, homes, and stocks at once. The result will be catastrophic price increases far beyond anything seen in modern history. This is how hyperinflation truly begins. The process is like a countdown clock, silent but unstoppable. First comes denial, then panic, then collapse. Every empire that debased its currency followed this same pattern. Rome, France, Weimar Germany, Argentina, Venezuela. The United States is not immune. It's simply the latest in line. Many economists refuse to admit this, clinging to faith in America's power and innovation. But no amount of technology or productivity can save a currency that's losing trust. When money dies, it doesn't matter how advanced the nation is, people simply stop believing. In 2024, America entered the confidence erosion phase. Global central banks reduced their U.S. Treasury holdings to the lowest levels in decades. Foreign investment in U.S. debt slowed dramatically, and even American citizens began exploring alternatives, from gold-backed stablecoins to local barter systems. All of these are signs of a system preparing for transition. When people begin to think outside of their national currency, it means that the psychological barrier is already broken. Once that happens, collapse becomes a question of when, not if. The coming year, 2025, is expected to mark the turning point. A combination of unsustainable debt, political chaos, and global rejection of the dollar will collide at once. That convergence will trigger the hyperinflationary explosion that economists have warned about for years. It will not be gradual, it will be sudden, violent, and irreversible. Hyperinflation destroys not only money but society itself. When savings become worthless, crime rises. When salaries lose value daily, people stop working. When prices double every week, faith in government collapses. This is the stage America is moving toward, the final stage of monetary collapse. The dollar's death clock continues to tick, second by second, as history's greatest financial bubble nears its end. And while most citizens remain unaware, those who understand what's coming are quietly preparing. The dollar's death clock. Why the final stage of collapse guarantees. Hyperinflation by 2025. Part 3. When the US dollar begins to fall. It won't just be an American problem. It will trigger a chain reaction across the entire planet. For decades, nearly every global economy has depended on the dollar, for trade, for savings, for stability. But once confidence in the dollar evaporates, the whole system built around it will begin to shake. The dollar is not just America's currency, it is the world's operating system. Oil, gold, food, shipping, and even foreign aid are all priced in dollars. Banks from Tokyo to London hold dollar reserves. Nations from Africa to South America borrow in dollars. So when the dollar collapses, the shockwave will hit every corner of the global economy. The first nations to feel the pain will be emerging economies that depend heavily on dollar-based debt. Countries like Brazil, Turkey, and South Africa have borrowed billions in US currency. When the dollar loses value, their debt payments will spin out of control. Their currencies will crash, inflation will explode, and political unrest will follow. But even advanced nations will not escape. Europe, Japan, and Canada all hold massive amounts of US Treasury bonds. If the dollar's value plummets, those holdings will lose worth instantly. That will destroy their central bank balance sheets and send panic through global markets. Meanwhile, the United States itself will face a tsunami of returning dollars. For decades, foreign nations have held trillions of dollars in reserves. But as faith collapses, they will rush to dump those reserves for anything tangible: gold, oil, land, or even cryptocurrencies. This repatriation of dollars will flood the US economy with unwanted currency. Imagine hundreds of trillions of dollars suddenly chasing a limited supply of goods. That's the spark of hyperinflation. Prices will skyrocket in days, not months. And the Federal Reserve will be powerless to stop it. When a currency dies, people seek alternatives immediately. In the digital age, those alternatives are ready and waiting. China has been testing its digital yuan, fully backed by its central bank. Russia and Iran are using blockchain systems to settle oil trades outside the dollar network. And the BRICS alliance is preparing to launch a gold-backed trade currency, something the dollar abandoned more than 50 years ago. This new system will not rely on trust or promises. It will rely on real, physical value, gold, energy, or commodities. In such a system, the dollar will have no place. Its only advantage: global acceptance will disappear. Once trade begins shifting away from the dollar, the US will lose its greatest privilege, the exorbitant advantage of printing money at will. For decades, America could create dollars out of thin air and buy real goods from other nations. This was the hidden empire, control through currency. But when that control fades, the empire crumbles. The collapse of dollar dominance will also destroy America's political power. Sanctions will no longer work if nations don't rely on the dollar. Countries like China, Russia, and Iran will trade freely without fear of U.S. retaliation. Even allies like Saudi Arabia, Japan, and South Korea will seek independence. This shift is already underway. In 2024, more than 70% of international energy contracts signed by BRICS members were non-dollar deals. This is not symbolic, it's a structural transformation. The global economy is quietly detaching from Washington's control. Once the dollar's foundation collapses, the U.S. will face consequences at home unlike anything in living memory. Imports will become unaffordable. Gasoline, electronics, medicine, and food prices will explode overnight. America's supply chain, which relies on cheap foreign goods, will break. Ordinary citizens will experience the collapse in daily life. Supermarket shelves will empty faster. Companies will shut down as costs soar. Workers will find their paychecks worthless within weeks, and savings accounts denominated in dollars will vanish in real value. The Federal Reserve will respond the only way it knows how, by printing even more. But that will only accelerate the destruction. Each new stimulus package, each new bailout, each new rescue will dig the hole deeper. Within months, the dollar could lose 80 to 90% of its purchasing power. Hyperinflation is more than an economic event, it's a psychological collapse. When people no longer believe their money has value, they abandon the system entirely. Barter returns. Gold and silver become currency again. Even cigarettes, food, or batteries can replace cash. During the Weimar Republic's collapse in 1923, Germans carried wheelbarrows of cash to buy a loaf of bread. In Zimbabwe, trillion-dollar notes were printed just to pay for groceries. In Venezuela, people burned currency because it was cheaper than firewood. Those images are warnings of what hyperinflation looks like when faith dies. Now imagine those same scenes not in Harare or Caracas, but in New York, Chicago, or Los Angeles. That's what the dollar death clock predicts for 2025 if current trends continue, and the evidence is impossible to ignore. Even the U.S. government quietly acknowledges the storm ahead. The Treasury Department's own reports show deficits that can never be repaid. The Federal Reserve admits it cannot shrink its balance sheet without collapsing the market. And global economists, from former IMF officials to private analysts, warn of a currency reset approaching fast. This reset could take many forms. It might begin as a digital dollar, introduced to replace the old one under the promise of stability. Or it could appear as a sudden devaluation, a government announcement that one new dollar equals 10 old ones. Either way, savers will lose everything. The collapse will also reshape geopolitics. China will rise as the leader of a new financial order, backed by gold and digital trade systems. Russia will gain influence through energy-backed currency agreements. The European Union may splinter, trying to protect its economies from the contagion. And the United States will face the painful end of its global dominance. This is not speculation, it's the pattern of history. Every world reserve currency has fallen after excessive debt and overreach. The Spanish real, the Dutch guilder, the British pound, all ruled the world once. All fell when they printed too much and believed their dominance would last forever. The dollar's story is no different. The only difference is scale. This will be the largest collapse ever seen. When the dollar falls, it won't just end an empire. It will end an era. The dollar's death clock. Why the final stage of collapse guarantees. Hyperinflation by 2025, Part 4. When the collapse finally reaches American soil, it won't look like a single event. It will unfold as a series of crises, economic, political, and social, each feeding the other. The first symptom will be denial, followed by confusion, and then chaos. By the time the government admits the truth, it will already be too late. At first, people will notice that prices rise faster than usual. A bag of rice that cost $10 last month will cost $12 this month and $20 the next. Rent and food will drain entire paychecks, while wages lag far behind. Families will be forced to choose between electricity, fuel, or groceries. Businesses will begin to collapse one after another. Small companies will go bankrupt because they can't afford raw materials. Manufacturers will stop producing goods because prices change daily. Supermarkets will ration items to avoid panic buying. The illusion of stability will vanish overnight. Then comes the currency panic. Banks will limit cash withdrawals to prevent runs. ATMs will run dry. Credit card networks may freeze as financial institutions attempt to stop digital outflows. People will queue for hours outside banks, only to find their savings worth half of what they were yesterday. Social tension will rise rapidly. Protests will erupt in major cities, driven by hunger, unemployment, and desperation. Law enforcement will struggle to maintain order as crime and looting increase. Gas stations will be overrun as people rush to fill their tanks before the next price jump. And within weeks, the government will declare emergency measures. Those emergency measures will come disguised as solutions. Price controls, ration cards, and new regulations will be introduced. But history shows that these controls always backfire. When the government fixes prices below market value, producers stop selling. Shortages follow, and the black market explodes. At this stage, trust in the government and financial institutions collapses. People will stop accepting dollars in exchange for goods. Barter systems will appear in neighborhoods and small towns. Gold and silver coins, even jewelry, will be used in private trade. Cryptocurrencies and stablecoins will become underground lifelines for digital transactions. The United States, the wealthiest nation on earth, will begin to resemble a nation under siege. Supply chains will break down. Hospitals will struggle to get medicine. Farmers will hoard crops instead of selling them at worthless prices. Cities will darken as utilities fail to cover costs. Meanwhile, the government will print even more money in a desperate attempt to regain control. New stimulus checks, universal basic income, and relief programs will flood the economy. But this will only accelerate the destruction of value. Every fresh dollar printed will make existing ones even weaker. At this point, hyperinflation will reach its terminal phase. Prices will no longer make sense. A loaf of bread might cost $100 in the morning and $500 by evening. Workers will demand to be paid daily, not monthly, just to keep up with rising prices. And retirees will find their life savings completely destroyed. The psychological impact will be devastating. Ordinary Americans, people who trusted banks, pensions, and the government will feel betrayed. Their financial security will vanish in front of their eyes. Fear will turn into anger, and anger will turn into unrest. This is how economic collapse transforms into political revolution. The Federal Reserve will attempt one final act of control, the introduction of a central bank digital currency, CBDC. Officials will claim that a new digital dollar will restore order and stop inflation. In reality, it will give the government total surveillance power over every transaction. Spending limits, social credit scoring, and programmable restrictions will be built into the system. Freedom will be traded for stability, and stability will still not return. To the average citizen, the collapse will feel like a slow erosion, followed by sudden disaster. Savings accounts will shrink to nothing. Real estate values will crash as buyers disappear. The stock market will become a casino, driven by fear instead of fundamentals. Retirement funds and insurance policies will evaporate in real terms. In response, people will begin to protect themselves. Those who understand what's happening will take decisive action. They will convert their savings into hard assets: gold, silver, land, food, and energy. They will store physical goods rather than digital promises, and they will begin forming local networks of trust communities that trade directly with one another. Outside the failing system, some families will move out of big cities to rural areas, seeking safety and self-reliance. Others will invest in renewable energy, water systems, and food production. The idea of independence, once forgotten, will return as a necessity. People will realize that survival depends on what they can hold, not what they can download. As chaos spreads, the United States government will likely blame foreign nations. Accusations will fly against China, Russia, and others for manipulating markets. But the truth will be obvious. America's collapse was self-inflicted. Decades of debt, greed, and denial finally destroyed the foundation of its currency. For ordinary citizens, understanding this reality will be critical. The people who see the truth early will suffer less. Those who continue to believe in political promises will lose everything. In hyperinflation, knowledge becomes the ultimate form of wealth. Those who prepare can survive, even thrive. It begins with recognizing what money really is. Trust. When that trust dies, the only real wealth left is what can't be printed: food, energy, metals, skills, and relationships. History shows that every collapse eventually resets into a new order. The survivors are those who adapt fastest. By 2025, this adaptation will determine the line between ruin and resilience. The dollar death clock will strike midnight, not just for governments or corporations, but for every individual who fails to prepare. The final warning signs are already flashing red: rising prices, collapsing savings, record debt, and public anger. Each signal counts down to the same inevitable conclusion: the end of the dollar era. The dollar's death clock. Why the final stage of collapse guarantees. Hyperinflation by 2025 Part 5. When the dust settles after the collapse, the world will awaken to a new reality. The dollar, once the pillar of global finance, will no longer rule the markets. The American empire, built on debt and confidence, will have fallen, and humanity will face the dawn of a completely different financial age. At first, the post-collapse world will be chaotic. Currencies will fluctuate wildly. Nations will rush to stabilize their economies using whatever resources remain. International trade will freeze for months as systems adjust to the absence of a trusted reserve currency. But slowly, a new order will begin to take shape. In this order, power will shift from paper money to real assets. Gold, silver, oil, and technology-backed currencies will replace debt-based systems. Nations that produce tangible goods will rise, while those that depend on printing money will fade into obscurity. China will likely emerge as the central power of the new era. Its long-term strategy to back trade with commodities and its digital yuan will finally bear fruit. China's Belt and Road Network will form the foundation for a new trade system that bypasses the West. Russia, India, and the BRICS alliance will play major roles in setting up this post-dollar world. The new global reserve currency may not belong to a single nation. Instead, it could be a basket of currencies pegged to gold and major commodities. This approach, already proposed by economists within BRICS, will restore a sense of tangible value to money. The age of fiat illusion will end, replaced by a standard that cannot be easily manipulated by politics. Western nations will struggle to adjust. The United States, burdened by hyperinflation and political division, will face years of economic rebuilding. Government agencies will be forced to downsize dramatically. Public confidence in institutions will remain shattered for an entire generation. But in that chaos, there will also be opportunity. As the old system burns, a new one will emerge from the ashes. Citizens who learn self-reliance, entrepreneurship, and local trade will become the pioneers of the new economy. Decentralized systems, blockchain technology, peer-to-peer, energy grids, and private barter networks will flourish. Communities will take power back from distant governments and rebuild from the ground up. This shift will also redefine the meaning of wealth. In a world where currencies can die overnight, true wealth will mean control over resources. Land, food, clean water, renewable energy, and precious metals will become the new standards of prosperity. Knowledge, skills, and the ability to create value locally will be priceless. Families will return to the basics. Home gardens will replace grocery stores. Solar panels will replace the grid. People will relearn the lost art of living within their means. And the economy will begin again, smaller, simpler, but stronger. Technology will play a powerful role in this rebirth. Digital tools will allow communities to trade directly without banks or governments. Cryptocurrency projects backed by real assets will become the backbone of international commerce. Artificial intelligence will help manage local production, distribution, and logistics without central control. The global economy will evolve into a decentralized network rather than a single empire. Meanwhile, nations that failed to adapt will fall into turmoil. Those who clung to fiat systems will face revolts, coups, and population flight. Borders will be redrawn. Old alliances will dissolve as countries realign around survival and resource control. The 21st century will mark not just a financial reset, but a geopolitical one. For the United States, the road to recovery will be long but not impossible. The country's greatest strength has always been innovation. Out of necessity, new thinkers will rise. Economists, engineers, inventors, rebuilding from the ground up. A new currency may eventually emerge, one backed by gold, silver, or digital proof of value. But that will only come after years of hardship and sacrifice. In this new age, the concept of money itself will change. People will finally understand that currency is not wealth, it's just a tool. Real wealth lies in production, in creativity, and in the ability to exchange value directly. The collapse of the dollar will force humanity to remember this ancient truth. For individuals, survival and success in the post-dollar world will depend on preparation. Those who diversify their assets today into precious metals, land, energy, and food will endure the storm. Those who cling to paper promises will face ruin. History rewards foresight and punishes denial. And 2025 will be the ultimate test of who truly understood the warning signs. There will also be hope in the chaos. Just as the fall of Rome gave rise to the Renaissance, the fall of the dollar could give birth to a new age of independence. Decentralized systems could free humanity from the grip of corporate and political elites. Innovation could thrive again, no longer suffocated by inflation and debt. The collapse could, paradoxically, create the foundation for a fairer world, but the transition will not be gentle. It will be marked by pain, by loss, and by the end of many illusions. The era of easy money, endless credit, and global consumerism will die. In its place, a new age of responsibility, sustainability, and real value will begin. The dollar death clock is more than a metaphor, it's a warning from history. Every empire that believed its currency was immortal eventually learned the same lesson. Paper wealth fades, but truth and value endure. The collapse is not just about economics, it's about awakening. By 2025, the world will look nothing like it does today. Nations will rise and fall, currencies will vanish, and systems will reset. But those who adapt will find opportunity in the ruins, because every ending is a beginning, and from the fall of the dollar, a new financial dawn will emerge. The clock is ticking. Those who listen to its sound still have time to act. Those who ignore it will wake too late as the last dollar burns in their hand.